My oh my, if you're just joining us, it's exactly 30 minutes past the hour of 8, and you are just in time for our views where we talk about, where we have conversations about things that happen in our everyday life. And today we're going to be talking about toxic children. Does such a term exist? I am not sure, but that is what we're going to be deliberating on. Of course, joining me at the center of this conversation are none other than the usual suspects, the ladies, and to my far left is none other than Apollo Sarah, and then right in the middle is Agi Uwase. Good morning, ladies, and thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Good morning, Siobhan.
Absolutely. Now, if the harsh criticism, broken promises, and trampled boundaries came from any other adult, you'd probably cancel the relationship for good. But when it is your child treating you with contempt, quitting isn't really an option. Now, an article online on exploringyourmind.com stated that not only are adults toxic, but it's also trickling down to the children. Some of the signs is they push limits, they want to get out with everything, they blackmail and make sure that everything just never seems like their fault. So first things first, and ladies, and I'll pose this first to you, Agi, would you consider yourself to have been a toxic child growing up?
No, I can say I was a stubborn child, but I was never toxic. I think it's different from being stubborn because I was always playful. I would, sometimes disturb my mother, my dad once in a while, but I always got myself back in line because I knew the consequences of it at the end of the day. We grew up where my mother and my dad were disciplinarians. So if you did something wrong and you know that it's wrong, they'll tell you this is wrong, you did this, and these are the repercussions. This is what you have to do. So I don't think I was toxic, but I was stubborn, I was.
Are you hiding you're being toxic under your being?
No,
there's nothing wrong
no.
with being. I don't think there's anything wrong.
I think toxic
okay, yes,
is
there is
extreme.
something wrong with being a toxic child, but again, the character traits are that you push beyond limits. You expect that every single thing that you ask for from your parents, that it should be given to you. And I feel like that is what every child is. And Sarah, do you think there is such a thing as a toxic child?
Yes.
Okay, what do you think this toxic child is exactly?
Well, first of all, a toxic child or toxic person definition is anyone whose behavior adds negatively or upsets your life. So yes, and toxic children are products of their parents. A child is not born toxic, never. This is a learned habit or trauma causes this child to become toxic. When you have a child that has anger issues, then there's a reason why this child is always angry all the time. You find maybe it comes from an abusive family, maybe their parents are dismissive, maybe they don't get enough attention and they feel that with their outbursts they are going to get the attention that they need. So yes, there are children that are toxic, but they are made, they are not born.
Okay, so as we continue the conversation, and I'll define who a toxic child is. Now, a toxic child is one who shows lack of empathy. The toxic child is not able to empathize with others. Instead, everything is about them and their needs, and they fail to see how anything they could do be seen by others as disruptive, harmful, or even hurtful. Extremely controlling, they are also very blackmailing. So Agi, do you think that when we're talking about children being toxic, is it an issue of poor upbringing?
Absolutely, 100%, because children who have grown up in an environment where they are disciplined in case they do something wrong, trust me, there's no way you can grow up toxic. Maybe if later on in life when you leave your parents or your guardian, whoever you grew up with, and then you find yourself in an environment, then a different environment, then there maybe you can pick up those traits and become toxic. But like Sarah said, it all comes back to how you were brought up, right? What do your parents do? I've seen a scenario where we were like some sort of family gathering, but there were also family friends, and there's this child who was causing a lot of chaos, a lot of commotion in the place, and everyone was telling the mother of the child, is like can't you see what this child is doing? And for her, she was very soft and like, come here honey, with all those soft words. You're looking at this child is grabbing a plate from here, is slapping people, is beating people's children. and you are not doing anything about it. And then there are also parents whereby if you are doing something wrong, they'll just give you a side eye and you'll know how to get yourself in place.
But aren't we
So it
throwing
goes back
parents
to-
under the bus a bit?
No,
so
the other
much?
thing is, of course, eventually, especially kids who go to boarding school and, you know, you only get to see your parents after 3 months. Definitely, you pick up those few character traits from your colleagues as well. I mean, but when you get back home, for a parent that knows their child and is very intentional, they will notice those few character traits, and at the end of the day, before you get back to school, you will have got yourself in line. So toxicity, when it comes to children, it's because parents or their guardians or whoever has helped in upbringing them has given them the leeway to do what they have to do, because then children will grow up entitled. I mean, we grew up in a situation whereby you say, Mommy, I need this. And she says, well, I cannot, not now, but maybe later. And you'll come down and it will come. But a child who is entitled, if you have brought up your child to know that I can get whatever I want, trust me, the moment you do not give it to them, they'll throw a tantrum, irrespective of who is around, whether they're visitors, it doesn't matter. They'll just embarrass you because you have allowed that kind of, behavior to go on and on. So I think that probably 95% is on the side of upbringing. Yes, for sure.
Sarah, is it an issue of poor parenting, or is it an issue of just the character of a child being a child?
No, there's a thin line between good parenting and bad parenting. Like I said, characters, especially, there's a difference between character and personality. Personality is something you're born with. Your characters, these are sometimes habits that you can pick up along the way. So when children cause tantrums and when children act out, yes, they may do so because they are young. They do not know how to control their feelings, their urges and their desires. They feel like sometimes it is not an intentional sense of entitlement, but they don't understand, why can't I have what I'm asking for? Make it make sense. It's like right there.
Yes.
You get it. You go to work every day and you're telling me you don't have money for ice cream. Then what are you doing? Why are you going to work in the first place? So children need to be guided and this is not easy when I say that children need to be guided, because it's very tasking. It can also get very frustrating, and that is why parents sometimes are, have a short fuse, because they don't understand why their child is not being as reciprocative or is, learning fast. But you see, with children, you need to take patience. But then again, you have to be very patient, but you have to, be consistent in guiding them and helping them understand, so that they don't turn out to be horrible people. But then again, there's also the instance of mental disorders, such as personality disorder. There's also narcissistic personality disorder. There is being bipolar. There is being schizophrenic. And these are disorders, mental disorders, that sometimes run in the family, sometimes can develop over time, for different reasons. Trauma has been the child has experienced trauma that later causes them to portray or manifest toxic behaviors. But you see, when I said that toxic children are made and not born, I strongly believe that, because as a parent, when you realize that your child is acting not usually or not acting as they should, then I think it's very important to have to consult, so that if your child has a personality disorder or a mental disorder, you have that, mitigated, because there are treatments and there's therapies to help with this.
Absolutely. But if it is away from looking at the mental disorder, and the child is not dealing with any mental disorder, for example, a mental disorder, I beg your pardon, and let's say they're actually teenagers, and it's a teenager just being a teenager, does it still fall under a child being toxic, or are they just being teenagers or adolescents or even young children?
There is no reason where you say children are being just children or teenagers are just being teenagers.
But isn't that an edge?
See, this is the thing. When we get to our teenage, when we become adolescents or adolescents, however you'd like to call it, we have so much turmoil within us that we do not know how to even express it or even understand what exactly is happening. The young girls are starting to get into their menstrual cycle, and that can trigger lots of aggression in your emotions are very unstable, and that can lead you to be a toxic person. Others, when they get to the teenager, they become rebellious because they have probably dealt with a lot that you do not know about aggression that they could not speak up against back then. But now that they are taller and stronger, they can fight back. And now you're thinking your child is being toxic, and yet your child is retaliating because they have experienced some type of trauma. It could have been the dismissiveness from their parents. It could have been biting comments, like, comparing them to one sibling. It could be, blunt out abuse where they are being beaten or they're experiencing sexual, violence against them, whatever the case may be. When somebody goes out and, like you said, the mental disorders have been ruled out, then there's something there. You're not going to be an awful person just for just. Something has triggered you to act that way.
Yes.
Do you get me? Something is triggering you, and it's very important for parents to be keen about it. Why are you so angry all the time? Why is it that the only way you feel you can be heard is by shouting or raising your voice or throwing things around? You get? Why do you think the only way to resolve a situation is by physically beating up somebody? Something is wrong.
Yes.
Why are you so why are you a bully? You get?
Yes.
Why are you a bully? You've heard the saying, bullies bully other people.
Yes.
Hurt people hurt people. So you're not going to wake up one morning and want to inflict harm onto another person if it hasn't yet been done to you. And again, we are ruling out mental disorders.
Yes.
You're not going to just wake up one day and just want to start some chaos.
And to just supplement a little bit, some other kids are actually toxic because of the environment they've grown up in. If you've grown up in an environment where you're seeing your mother is battering your mother day in, day out, there's a lot of shouting day in, day out. Trust me, chances are you will become toxic, because this is what
Learned
this is
behavior,
the example
yes.
that you have seen, and definitely it rubs off on the child. They will probably think that this is how things are handled.
Yes.
If say a woman is, say that they've done something wrong, you have to beat them because they have seen their father do that. And also the other thing, I think it's parents who raise their children with an iron hand. Now, it's different from being a disciplinarian and also raising your child with an iron hand, not having to understand or listen to them in case they've done something. Give them the opportunity to explain to you, and maybe you can try to understand. And if you are not that parent who is understanding, at a later point in life, especially when they get, they become teenagers, they'll become very rebellious, because with all the hormones going in the body and what their colleagues tell them at school about their experiences, there's those who tell you, I talk back at my mom, I talk back at my dad, they're like, oh, so I think I can actually do this as well. So I think it also comes back to, parents.
Society,
That is true. And
peer pressure,
this is definitely something that I will say very many times, and I like to say this, and this is something that my dad has taught me over time, that children are constantly reading from parents' scripts without their permission. Every single little thing that you do at home, a child is picking up. Every single time you bark at your wife or at your husband, the child is listening. Every single time you say terrible things or you're backbiting even their aunties and uncles and talking about their cousins while they're hearing, they are picking up on those habits. Every single time the maid or the person that helps you at home does something and you just slap them, or every single time you want something, you as a parent, you're also throwing a tantrum, that child is picking up on that. It actually reminds me of a conversation that we had yesterday, and while we're talking about abandoning, you're quick to say that your child is toxic and even abandon them, not forgetting that you might actually be the reason as to why the child is toxic. Now, I'm not saying that parents hold full responsibility for a child being toxic. I also know that a child also has a role to play, because they could choose to control their emotions. But let's look at how to recognize toxic children in our family. Now, first, it's important not to confuse toxic children with those who display age-appropriate behavior. Now, this is what I was actually asking, because there are children who will display age-appropriate behavior. Yeah, like what, in short, like what would you expect from a teenager? A teenager is always going to want to go around, getting to understand things, how do things understand, and then a child will always be a child. You get what I mean? It's very important that you differentiate a toxic child from a child who is behaving exactly as per their age. So the first one is breaking the rules. Non-compliance with punishments and avoiding chores, avoiding housework are warning signs to watch out for. It is also important to keep your eyes peeled for any sign of a child trying to order one of his parents around. Now, if the child throws a tantrum when he isn't allowed to watch TV, I'll give an example. There is this one time I went for a function. So I think this particular child grew up in a family where he had the dad call the mom by her name. Like, let's say Aggie or Sarah. Sarah, could you please get me this? Could you? So the child took it that, oh, okay, it's Kawa. So one day we're at a function and the child says, Martha, could you please get me a slice of cake? And everyone was like, what's going on here? But you see, while it might be okay for the dad to call the mom that way, it's not okay for the child to call the mom by the name, especially in African setting. So it all goes back to what precedent are you setting for your children. The next is other warning signs that we shouldn't ignore are pickiness, lack of empathy towards others, a low tolerance for frustration, and tendency to try to manipulate others to get what they want. They make cruelty, critical remarks, they give you the silent treatment, and they constantly lie or even deny. Now, my next question would be, how can we be able, for a parent who's watching this morning, how can they deal with a toxic child?
Number one, pay attention to your children. Even the slightest aggression should just trigger a red flag and be like, hey, where is this coming from? Where is this attitude coming from? Pay a lot of attention to your toxic children.
Does that mean that even when they're
to your
paying
children
attention,
when they're getting toxic? I mean,
they look at it in an aspect of it should not be a them problem. They should also reflect on themselves as parents as well.
it's important to have to reflect on yourself as a parent, because as a parent, you're the God-given caregiver and teacher. It's your responsibility. That child is yours before anybody else's, before community, before school, before their grandparents. You are the caretaker. And as a parent, it's your sole responsibility to raise that child into a decent human being, because that child is going on to go on to create their own family, and you do not want to have to carry on generational curses because you ignored them and said, oh, that is how they are, that is how she is, oh, she doesn't greet visitors when they come. Why? I need to understand, why don't you do that? Don't you understand it is courtesy? And do they understand the importance of being courteous? You have to pay attention. You have to question, keep questioning. Don't think that you have done your job just because you're providing the basic needs, food, water, shelter, education. Go on to also keep on checking their values, their principles, their attitude. You have to check on them. When you have a child, you mentioned one thing, signs of toxic children, they continuously lie and deny. That means they're becoming pathological liars. Why do they constantly lie? Is it that every time they tell the truth, you're so harsh?
Or
are they afraid of telling the truth or owning up to the mistake? Have you taught them the importance of taking accountability and responsibility? Are you teaching them the fundamentals of integrity? Do you get where I'm going with this? So the minute you notice a pattern, like if you ever catch yourself saying, that is how my child is, there is a pattern there and you need to check it.
Okay. So how about you, Aggie?
I think for me, basically as a parent, well, I'm not a parent, I'm saying for parents. That's what you first decide on what you want at the end of the day. Because I mean, Sarah talked about you are the parent. Decide on what you want and how you want, your children to behave. If let's say you want them home by 7 p.m., you want them, to not be to greet visitors when they come home. Decide on that and tell them from the word go. When a visitor comes, you have to greet them. You talked about maybe asking them what they're not doing. Maybe say a visitor has come and they're not saying hi to them or not greeting them. You need to follow that up as well. I mean, right now we are in an era where so many children are growing up with nannies, whereby parents are not almost 100% available and present in their children's lives. So they never get to follow up on those particular things. If let's say the kids have gone to school, follow up with their teachers. Are they doing the things that they're supposed to do? All those values that you have instilled in them, respect among others, are they doing them? At the end of the day, don't let them have the leeway. Don't say, like Sarah said, my child is like this. No, your child is not like that. It's because you have let them be like that. If you follow up on them, trust me, there's no way you can repeat something today, the next day, I mean, discipline that child and they never get to change. They may not do it from their heart, but they will do it because you want them to do it. So So set the precedent for them. Decide on what you want and make sure it's implemented. And I'm not saying in a hard way. Try to make them understand why they need to do what they have to
I
do.
like the fact that you highlighted and talked about implementation, and this is, I think, something very many parents struggle with, to follow up and follow through to your threats. You know, very many times our children do something, and for example, you're caught in a situation where a child is constantly doing something, and you're constantly telling them, Shivan, if you do not stop doing this, I'm going to beat you. You do it the second time. Shivan, if you do not stop doing this, I'm going to beat you. For heaven's sake, just beat them. Because every single time, no, because every single time you keep saying, Shivan, you've done this, I'm going to beat you. Or Shivan, actually, I remember when I was young, and I asked this question to you if you were a toxic child. I was a toxic child, because constantly my parents would always say, Shivan, stop doing this, we're going to send you back home. They would say it the first time. Shivan, stop doing this, we're going to send you back home. And they never did. So their threats to me were like, okay, you're not going to do it. So you see,
yes.
I'm initially going to fall into a place where I know every single threat you say, you will not follow it up. So my advice to a parent this morning is that even as you're dealing with a toxic child, you need to follow up and follow through. But also,
hold on, I just want to share one thing, and I feel it's very important. I also want to share with parents that even though in your home your children are actually well behaved and you provide a safe environment in your home, you need to also let your children be aware of society. When they go out to the malls or with their friends or at school, you need to help your child understand that how you act at home may not be the same way with society. So help them also understand differences out there, and also let them know that those differences should not impact you in any way. You shouldn't allow them impact in any way, or you shouldn't allow toxic people. Sometimes children get toxic because they are interacting with toxic people elsewhere outside the home. So you need to help them understand that their behavior or other people's behavior should not affect who you are, who you truly are as a person.
So as we continue to handle even how a parent can deal with a toxic child, I think it's very important that you watch this video, because it brings out an aspect that very many parents tend to neglect, and that is the aspect of bringing them up. You know, sometimes as a parent, it is not your role to fix your child. Sometimes you actually have to let them walk on that old Damascus road alone and let the fire burn them. Then that will probably put them back in shape. And very many parents will disagree with me. But that wraps up the conversation that we had for you this morning on our views. Keep watching Sunrise at Sea.
It's about that time where we have to say goodbye, unfortunately, and it breaks my heart to have to leave you, but no worries, we'll be back again tomorrow, same time, same place, from 7 a.m. all the way to 9 a.m. I hope you had a lovely time with us on the show, and please go ahead and connect with us across all social media platforms on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. If you ever miss an episode of Sunrise at Sea, you can go on and rewatch it on our YouTube channel, and that is at CTV Uganda. We also stream live every day on our website, and that's at www.ctv.co.ug, and also on our Facebook page, and that's at CTV Uganda. From me and the ladies, be blessed, be kind, continue to learn every day. Every day is a new experience, is a new opportunity to learn. So learn, empower yourself, and release your mind from mental slavery. Until tomorrow, be good, bye-bye, and also follow SOPs. COVID is still here. Have a great day.